My name is Ella, I'm 36 years old and work as a nurse anesthetist at a major hospital in Oregon. I've spent nearly a decade in the operating room, accustomed to the hum of ventilators, the cold lights, and surgeries that last for hours. But no operation has ever drained me like what I'm about to share. The silent battle I had to fight, not in a hospital, but right within my own family. I've been married to Andrew for 8 years. He's a calm, somewhat introverted man who works in administration for a small insurance company. I used to think I had chosen the right person. We lived in a small house in the suburbs of Eugene. We didn't have kids, but we had a little garden and 2 adorable dogs. Life wasn't exciting, but it was stable, and I always appreciated that peace. Until Caleb showed up. Caleb is Andrew's younger brother. He's 6 years younger and always looks like he just stepped off the set of a reality TV audition. Caleb constantly has big ideas that never go anywhere, from online pet supply sales to a real estate investment networking app. Each venture is hyped as his life-changing breakthrough, and ends in debt or vanishing into thin air. This time was no different. Caleb came to our house one Saturday afternoon, the usual smile on his face, holding a cup of coffee, eyes sparkling with charm. He said he needed a $15,000 investment to revamp an e-bike business. I'd heard nearly the same story 3 times last year. "It's just a temporary loan, Ella," Caleb said, like I was some sort of mobile bank. "I'll pay you back in 3 months, promise." I sat across from him in the living room, my hand resting on a glass of iced tea I hadn't touched. I didn't say anything right away. I thought about the savings account Andrew and I had built over the years. I thought about the last time Caleb borrowed money from our mother-in-law to invest in crypto and lost everything in just a few weeks. I took a deep breath. "Caleb, I'm sorry, but no," I said slowly, clearly. "That money is set aside for roof repairs and emergencies. I'm not comfortable lending that much, especially when—" I stopped, not wanting to finish the sentence, but he got the message. Caleb nodded, lips pressed together like he was holding something in. He didn't argue, just stood up and patted my shoulder like people do after an unsuccessful conversation. "Got it, thanks for listening." I thought that was the end of it, but 3 days later I received an invitation to a family meeting at my in-laws' house. It felt strange. They rarely called family meetings unless it was a holiday. Andrew only said vaguely, "Everyone wants to talk about Caleb's situation." I showed up that Tuesday evening. The living room was packed. Andrew's parents, his siblings, and their spouses, even an aunt from Idaho was there. As soon as I walked in, I could feel something was off. Everyone was smiling, but the air was tight like a stretched wire. I sat down next to Andrew, who barely looked at me all night. Then my father-in-law spoke. "We're all very concerned about Caleb. He needs our support, and we think it's best to handle this democratically." I narrowed my eyes. "What do you mean?" "We've decided to hold a vote," he said, smiling like it was a party game, "to see if we should help Caleb with the loan. Majority rules." I turned to Andrew, my heart pounding. He was still looking at the floor, fingers interlocked. Not a word in my defense. I let out a short laugh, the kind with no humor. "So I'm no longer part of this family, just a vote?" I looked around the room at faces I'd known for years that now felt like strangers. "Well, if everyone's so fond of voting," I said, my voice icy, "I have a proposal of my own." And I pulled an envelope from my purse. The room went dead silent as I placed the cream-colored envelope on the oak coffee table. All eyes were locked on it, as if it contained something that could blow the roof off the house. I didn't speak right away. I let them wait. "I have a vote I'd like everyone to take part in," I said, my voice steady and slow, like reading results in an operating room. "But first, there are a few documents I think everyone should review." I carefully opened the envelope and pulled out 2 sheets of paper. The first I slid toward Andrew, who now looked like he was trying to shrink into his wooden chair. "This is a copy of the title deed for the house we live in. As you can see," I flipped the page and pointed to the legal section. "My name is the only one listed. We paid off the mortgage last year and I'm the sole owner. A strategic decision I thought wise to make early on." A light cough came from Aunt Caroline, the only one in the room who'd never been involved in the family's financial messes. Everyone else seemed to be holding their breath. I pulled out the second document. "And this," I placed it gently on the table, "is a revised prenuptial agreement I signed 2 months ago. It's notarized and legally binding. This amendment separates all of my assets from Andrew's in the event that we decide to end the marriage. A wave of shock seemed to roll through the room. My mother-in-law leaned back, her face pale like someone had just crushed her last hope. Andrew's sister-in-law opened her mouth but couldn't form words. I looked directly into my father-in-law's eyes. The one who'd proposed that bizarre vote. Since everyone agrees that majority rules make sense, I continued, I'd like to hold a little vote of my own. The question is simple. Should this marriage continue? Andrew turned to me, face drained of color like he'd just woken from a nightmare. Ella, what are you doing? I looked at him, not angry, not accusing, just blank, a look I wasn't even sure where I'd learned. I'm simply applying your family's rule, voting instead of communicating. Right then the door opened. A cold gust blew in along with Caleb's arrival. He walked in, late as usual, still holding a half-eaten sandwich. When he saw the scene in the room, he stopped short. Why does everyone look like they've seen a ghost? He asked, eyes darting from his mother's tense face to the open envelope on the table. Caleb, sit down, my father-in-law said, voice lower than before. We're revisiting a few things. Caleb looked at me, then at Andrew. What did I miss? I turned to him, no need for politeness anymore, just a family meeting. Everyone just voted that I should give you $15,000, and I responded with legal documentation. Caleb frowned. What? And another question has been raised, I continued, keeping my voice calm. Whether Andrew and I should remain married. You arrived just in time to cast your vote. He gave a nervous laugh. What is this, some kind of joke? No one laughed, not a single soul. Caleb glanced at Andrew, but my husband didn't move. The whole room felt like a frozen stage. I could see Caleb searching for backup, but this time, no one reached out. I thought this was about me borrowing money, he muttered. Wrong thought, I replied, my voice light like a blade sliding over glass. This time, it's about values. About loyalty. And about me no longer sitting quietly while decisions are made for me. Caleb took a step back. You can't do this. You think so? I stood tall. You call this a family. But this whole family just treated me like a walking wallet. You use charm to drag everyone into your cycle of failures. And Andrew, stay silent. I looked at my husband. You know I didn't want to say all this in front of everyone, but apparently, if not here, it would never be said. Andrew opened his mouth, then closed it again. He just lowered his head, not a word. I gave a small nod. Then the vote is over. I don't need to count the ballots, because in the end, I'm the one who has to live with the outcome, and I've made my choice. I gathered the documents, folded them neatly, and slipped them back into my bag. No one stopped me as I turned to leave. Not a single voice. Not a single person stood up. I had just stood up, ready to walk out of that suffocating atmosphere when a voice spoke. So soft it almost blended into the air. Ella, wait. I turned my head. It was Melanie, Andrew's sister. The one who had sat silently all evening, eyes downcast, saying nothing. She looked at me, then around the room. Her eyes held something different, like something inside her had just cracked open. This isn't the first time, Melanie said, her voice trembling. Caleb borrowed $9,000 from me 2 years ago. Said it was to open a sporting goods store in Bend. I believed him. The whole room went still. I remained where I was, clutching my purse, my palm tightening. He promised to pay it back in 6 months. It's been 3 years, Melanie gave a short, bitter laugh. I haven't seen a penny, never heard another word about that store either. Caleb flinched, turning toward her. Melanie, what are you saying? I explained already. No, she cut him off. You never explained, you just disappeared. A dead silence fell over the room. Then from across the table, Andrew's youngest brother Ethan, the one everyone called the good kid, spoke softly. I thought it was just me. Ethan glanced at me, then at their parents. Caleb borrowed $4,500 from me for college tuition. Said he needed it urgently to register for a marketing course in Portland. I withdrew it from my student savings account. He never took that course. My in-laws sat frozen. My mother-in-law brought her hand to her mouth, eyes wide in shock. And Caleb? His face reddened, his lips moved soundlessly. You're all Trying to make me look bad, he snapped. I let out a short breath, unsure if it was frustration or exhaustion. I don't need to make anything up, Caleb, I said, locking eyes with him. And as for what they just said, I think you know it better than anyone. I didn't mean any harm, Ethan said, his voice cracking. I just thought I was helping you. So did I, Melanie added. But the more I look at you today, the more you seem like someone else. Someone shameless. That's not true, Caleb nearly shouted. I tried, I just needed more time. I used to believe that, another voice chimed in from the corner. It was Uncle Frank, my mother-in-law's brother, known for being frugal and tough. 3 years ago, you called me in the middle of the night, said you were stranded in Spokane and needed money to get home. I wired you $1,800. Called back the next morning. You never picked up. Caleb turned in a circle as if searching for someone to defend him. No one spoke. Even his father, who had just led the ridiculous vote, stared blankly at the floor like he didn't know where he was. So now you're all turning against me? Caleb shouted, eyes wide, pointing at each person. My sister, my brother, my uncle, and what about my brother, Andrew? Aren't you going to say something? Andrew kept his head down, not a word. I looked at Caleb, a strange emotion welling up inside me. Not satisfaction, not anger, just a vast emptiness. No one's turning against you, I said. You're just finally seeing the consequences of your own actions. Caleb staggered back toward the door. You all think I'm some kind of user, a leech? No one answered, but the silence spoke louder than words. He let out a growl, tossed his half-eaten sandwich on the table and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the window panes rattled. For a moment, only the sound of wind whispered outside the window, and the thick, heavy air lingered among people who once thought they understood one another. I turned to look at Andrew. He still hadn't lifted his head. My mother-in-law wiped away tears, her expression a mix of shock and confusion. I didn't know. I never thought it would come to this. Melanie sighed. I've known for a while, but I thought saying something would just make the family more divided. Turns out, silence is what made everything explode. I set my purse down on a chair and turned back toward the table, eyes locked on Andrew. This isn't just about Caleb. It's about how you stayed silent all night. Not one word from me, not one look of support. You know exactly what Caleb's like, so why? Andrew looked up at me. The eyes that had made me feel safe for 8 years now looked like 2 hollow voids. Tonight isn't everything, I said slowly, but it is the beginning. I didn't know where it would all lead, but I knew one thing for sure. Caleb wasn't the only one hiding something, and I was beginning to suspect Andrew had secrets I had never even come close to uncovering. That night, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of Eugene, the streetlights blurring into streaks behind the windshield. I pulled into a parking lot near a small cafe by the Willamette River, turned off the engine but didn't get out. My hands clung to the steering wheel, and only one question echoed in my mind. Why was Andrew silent to the point of cruelty? I sat there for an hour, until my phone buzzed. It was Melanie. Ella, if you're free tomorrow, I'd like to meet in private. There's something I think you need to know. I didn't ask anything else, I just replied with one word, okay. We met the next afternoon at a small cafe near the university. The space was cozy, but Melanie's eyes were cold and hard as steel. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't ask if I'd eaten. She just slid a thick white envelope across the table toward me. I never planned to give you this, Melanie said evenly, but last night when you pulled out those documents in front of the family, I knew you deserved the full truth. I opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of printouts, account statements, screenshot emails, and several signed documents I'd never seen before. I glanced at one line and quickly flipped back to the first page. This is an account under both Andrew and Caleb's names? I asked, heart pounding. Opened 3 years ago? Melanie nodded. They called it a project account, but really it was where Caleb funneled money from his investments, most of which failed. Andrew helped him clean a few transactions by cycling money through that account, then slowly withdrawing it. I flipped quickly through the pages. Each line felt like a stab to the chest. $8,200 transferred from my savings account to an unfamiliar account. $3,500 listed as roof repair payment. With a fake invoice I remembered clearly. 2 credit cards opened in my name, but the contact email was Andrew's. I felt a chill deep in my bones. I found this stuff on Caleb's old computer, Melanie went on. I kept it because, well, I haven't trusted them in a long time, but I didn't think Andrew was this deep into it. I went still. A bitter feeling surged, not because of the money stolen, but because of the trust drained from me without my knowing. And one more thing, Melanie said hesitantly. About a month ago, Andrew and Caleb went to see your parents. I looked up, as if jolted out of a trance. What? They went to your house, told your parents you were considering investing in one of Caleb's new ventures, and they wanted your parents to co-invest. They used your name, even your professional reputation at the hospital. Luckily, your mom called me first because something didn't feel right. I couldn't say a word. My chest felt like it was weighed down with stone. They hadn't just taken money. They'd taken my name, my trust, and my dignity to deceive others. What did Andrew say to you? I asked quietly. He told me not to complicate things. Said it was all for Caleb and it would all work out. I leaned back in my chair, my heart a mess of splintered wood after a storm. I thought about all the times Andrew had said everything is under control, those sweet reassurances I'd believed for years. I looked at Melanie. Do you have copies of all of this? Yes, she nodded. If you need them, I'll give them to you. I nodded slowly, then looked out the window, where people bustled past, completely unaware of the storm that had just erupted inside me. I knew I needed time, but this time I didn't just want the truth, I wanted action. I was no longer the woman willing to sit quietly through family votes. Now I had proof, and I had a reason. Andrew thought I'd stay quiet like always, but he forgot one important thing. I'm the only one who knows how deeply I've been hurt, and I'm the only one who knows exactly how to end it the right way. A week later I received a text from my mother-in-law. Family dinner this Sunday, hope you can join us. I stared at that sentence for several minutes. The house I once considered a safe haven now felt more like a stage, where lies were masked with smiles and trust was traded like currency. I had considered not going, but then I thought again. No, this isn't the time for silence anymore. On Sunday evening, I wore a simple white blouse, dark slacks, and a charcoal gray blazer. Nothing flashy but strong enough. I arrived at my in-laws' house right on time, carrying a black document bag. The atmosphere in the living room was exactly like every other time. The dinner table was fully set, warm yellow lights glowing, soft jazz music playing from a speaker in the corner. But just one glance at everyone's eyes told me. They were all tense, waiting for something. Andrew stood up to pull out my chair, giving a small smile like everything had blown over. I sat down, placed my document bag on the chair beside me, and waited for everyone to settle. Dinner began with my mother-in-law's traditional lasagna. Everyone tried to act natural, chatting about work, the weather, and a new Netflix show. I stayed silent, nodding politely. When dessert was served, I set my fork down, stood up, and calmly said, I have something to share. All eyes turned to me. Andrew furrowed his brow, looking confused. My in-laws leaned forward slightly. I opened the bag, took out a neatly organized set of documents, and laid them out one by one on the table, right in the middle of untouched dessert plates. This, I said, pointing to the first page, is a bank account statement under both Andrew's and Caleb's names. It was opened 3 years ago, used to funnel money for private investment projects. No one in this family has ever heard of. A long silence followed. I didn't pause. This is a copy of a fake invoice for the $3,500 Andrew claimed was for roof repairs. The company listed on the invoice doesn't exist, I checked. I turned to the next page, my hands steady like I was prepping for an injection in the OR. And this, I paused, is a printed email sent to my parents from a fake address using my name to convince them to invest in Caleb's new venture. The email promises a return in 6 months and claims, Ella fully endorses this project. I had no idea it existed until last week. I looked up. Andrew was pale, lips pressed tight. My mother-in-law had a hand over her mouth, eyes filled with horror. My father-in-law sat with his hands clasped, staring down at the table like it might tell him what to do. Then, from the end of the table, Melanie, the only one who knew the full truth, gave a slow nod. She pulled out her phone and opened a thread of messages. I have copies of the texts between me and Andrew where he asked me not to tell anyone about these transactions, she said. He said he'd sort things out before Ella finds out. But now, I think Ella deserves to know. Andrew shot to his feet, chair scraping loudly against the floor. I was trying to fix things, his voice cracked. Caleb helped me once, when I was in trouble with my old job. I couldn't let him go down alone. Helped how? I asked, voice calm but sharp as a scalpel. By letting me carry debts I never agreed to, by using my name to scam my own parents? Andrew looked at me, those hollow eyes now filled with fear. I was under investigation for mishandling insurance records, he said quietly. I could have lost my job. Caleb? He took some of the blame. In return, I promised I'd help when he needed it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. You call that loyalty? I call it a deal, a transaction built on lies. Andrew sank back into his seat like the life had drained out of him. No one said another word. I looked around the dinner table, the supposed heart of warm family meals. Now it was just silence, shame, and undeniable proof. I didn't come here tonight to apologize or seek forgiveness, I said slowly. I came to say that I know everything, and this time, I'm the one ending the game. I gathered the documents, placed them back in my bag, and stood up. Thank you for dinner, I said, but I think this will be the last time I sit at this table. That night when I returned to the house we once called home, the kitchen light was still on. Andrew sat at the table, shirt still buttoned, holding a glass of water he hadn't touched. He looked up when he heard the door open, his expression that of a man who'd just realized he was lost. Ella, wait, we need to talk. I set the document bag on a chair and quietly walked to face him. I pulled a neatly stacked folder from inside the bag. No harsh words, no blame. I simply slid the folder across the table. Andrew looked down, his hands trembled slightly as he opened it. When he read the first line, Petition for Divorce, Lane County Court, I saw his shoulders freeze. Ella, you don't have to do this, he whispered. I know I messed up, but I can fix it. I swear. I shook my head. You don't understand. This isn't just about you and Caleb. This is about how you watched me be humiliated in that vote and said nothing, how you let me carry the fallout alone while you quietly drained our accounts. He stood, eyes red. Give me a chance, just one. We can go to counseling. I can pay it all back. You can... Andrew? I interrupted. I've had so many chances to walk away and I chose to stay. Because I believed in love. But love can't survive without respect, and you lost that. I turned, he followed, but I was already at the door. I'll be staying at a hotel for a few days. After that, my attorney will be in touch to finalize everything. I closed the door before he could finish. 3 days later, I officially filed for divorce. The revised prenup I quietly signed 2 months ago became my lifeline. Thanks to it, I kept the house, all of my personal accounts, and everything I had worked for over 8 years of relentless effort. Andrew didn't contest it. Maybe he knew there was nothing left to argue. He moved out on a gray Wednesday morning, no text, no call. Later, I heard he moved back in with his parents. The same house where Sunday dinners had once felt sacred but now sat silent. As for Caleb, the spark that started it all, he vanished almost immediately after that dinner. Melanie, with remarkable resolve, officially filed a lawsuit to recover the money she'd lent. She wasn't the only one. Uncle Frank and Ethan also began legal proceedings. Within weeks, Caleb deleted his social media accounts and cut contact with everyone. Rumor had it he was now living in New Jersey under a different name, running some vague financial consulting firm. One early fall morning I sat on my porch, a mug of hot tea in hand, watching soft sunlight filter through maple leaves. It had been a long time since I'd felt this kind of stillness. I can't say I walked away from that marriage without scars. There were nights I lay awake replaying Andrew's promises, Caleb's glances, my mother-in-law's doubts, and the crushing loneliness of feeling like no one had my back. But I learned how to stand again. I learned how to trust myself. And I learned that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go. I cleaned the house, changed the curtains, rearranged the furniture, small things that didn't erase the memories but helped me begin anew. Melanie and I stayed in touch, and for the first time in years we talked like two women who had weathered a storm. Not just sisters-in-law making small talk. I returned to work at the hospital, but this time, I no longer saw it as the only place that gave me a sense of worth. I started taking art classes on Friday evenings, a hobby I had abandoned since college. I reconnected with old friends, smiled more, and spent more time with myself, something I hadn't done throughout my entire marriage. Someone once asked me, if you could go back, would you choose Andrew again? I always smile, not because I have regrets, but because I know I walked that path and I survived. I used to think I needed my in-laws' approval to feel validated. I used to believe love had to be voted on by outsiders, but now I only need one thing: the courage to walk out of a burning house even if no one gives me permission. And I did it. From my own story, I've learned that sometimes the most painful part isn't the betrayal, it's how long you stayed silent while others took your kindness for granted. I once believed love was enough, but it turns out respect and honesty are the true foundation of something lasting. No one needs to vote on your worth. You deserve to be heard, to be protected, and to live a life that isn't tied to repeated apologies. And most importantly, leaving can also be a form of love, the kind you give to yourself. What do you think about Ella's decision and everything she went through? Feel free to share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, heartfelt stories about life and family relationships.